LSU's law school. After law school, she worked for the online legal publishing company Westlaw, and before that she served as a law clerk for the 15th Judicial District Family Court. That's hard for me to say. Before going into private family law practice. Please welcome Nancy Landry.
Thank you, Linda. I appreciate that nice introduction. I'm going to switch glasses to my readers. All right, well, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to speak with you all today. And before I begin my remarks, I want to express my condolences to the family of a broadcasting legend, Eric Paulson, who passed away on Saturday. Eric was a New Orleans staple for nearly 50 years, and I know that his family, his friends, and the team at WWL are grieving his loss today, so my prayers are with them. It's been 301 days since I took office. That's 43 weeks of meetings, 3 legislative sessions, a presidential preference primary, and in just 8 days, my first presidential election as Secretary of State. And the closer we get to the November 5th election, the more my schedule resembles a Thanksgiving turkey, completely stuffed and everybody wants a piece. As of Saturday, we've had 656,155 voters who have voted early in person, and 105,006 have returned their absentee ballots. That's a total of 761,161 voters who've already cast a ballot, and that's nearly the same number as this point in 2020. And now, I was with the agency in 2020, but being in the top job now means that I'm under the microscope this time. And frankly, I welcome the scrutiny. On November 6th, people will see that our agency delivered what Louisiana voters have come to expect: a secure election with fast and accurate results. I believe that's why the voters elected me last year. They understand that this is not a position where you can wing it. There's no time for on-the-job training. We were in the middle of a special legislative session overhauling our primaries within 1 week of the inauguration. The voters know that well-oiled machines don't just appear out of nowhere. They're built over time through consistent effort. They also know that hard work can be undone with the wrong person in charge. When I took office, I promised the same things I ran on: continuity, consistency, and competence. And we have delivered on those promises and will continue to do so. When our governor and the legislature wanted to move to a closed party primary system for select offices, I worked with them to buy ourselves time to educate the voters about the change and to make sure it's implemented correctly. And when our clerks of courts and registrars of voters came to me with questions about the changes to our primaries and the next steps for securing our new voting system, I responded by traveling across the state and meeting with them in person. When our partners in the state legislature filed 11 bills to strengthen our election integrity posture, close loopholes, and ensure uniform practices across the state, my staff and I were at the Capitol ready to do the people's work and provide expert testimony. I'm especially proud to say that the bills allowing us to expand our annual voter list maintenance and enforce Louisiana's non-citizen voting ban were signed into law, along with the 9 other bills that we supported. Now, I know some of you might say, but Secretary Landry, there have only been a few dozen non-citizens who've attempted to vote. But let me be clear, even one non-citizen vote compromises everything it means to be a U.S. citizen. Voting is a right and responsibility that must be reserved for citizens, and that's entirely uncontroversial. A recent Gallup poll showed that 83% of Americans favor a requirement to provide proof of citizenship when registering to vote for the first time. This goes to the very heart of our electoral process. The notion that one person gets one vote is a core democratic principle. Non-citizen voting undermines this principle by weakening the single greatest right that we have as citizens. Other states can do as they like, but Louisiana will never tolerate that practice. Men like my dad didn't step forward to serve so that our country's laws could be ignored so flagrantly. We're a nation of laws, and they ought to be enforced. At every turn this year, our agency has demonstrated that your state government can exceed all expectations with clear-eyed, knowledgeable leadership. That's the hope for my tenure as Secretary of State, to continue delivering on the promises I made during my campaign. It may only be my first year, but so far we're batting 1,000 in that regard. Come November 6th, I will have two primary goals: to conduct a statewide voter education campaign ahead of the changes to the closed party primaries, and second, to secure Louisiana's next voting system. The former will be a heavy lift, but we're up to the task. And I want to ensure everyone that every voter across the state, is aware of the change before it's implemented in 2026. The last thing I want is for a voter to be unable to participate in a primary election because they didn't hear it from us. Thankfully, I'll be able to rely on my excellent team for that. They're formulating an outreach plan that will utilize every available resource to make sure that every voter from Bastrop to Bunkie to Bogalusa is aware of the change. The legislature has promised that we'll have all the resources we need to ensure the success of this campaign, right, Dixon? And they have my gratitude for that. The goal of securing a new voting system has a few more moving parts than educating the voters on the changes to closed party primaries. The process has been years in the making, and frankly, it's long overdue. You all know how old our machines are, and honestly, some of my staffers are younger than our machines. They were made by a company that no longer exists, and we have to cannibalize parts to keep them operable. If this were the private sector, they would have been phased out a decade ago. And that's the thing about the public sector. There are multiple layers of oversight and bureaucracy for procurements this important. The biggest hurdle is Act 480, which is an act that was passed during the 2021 legislative session. It needlessly adds years to the procurement process, and if left unchanged, it could be 2028 before we finally have a fully implemented replacement voting system. There was an attempt to reform this law during the regular session this year, and unfortunately, a fair amount of fear-mongering stalled the process. Once this election is over, all of my energy and focus will be on these two tasks for the foreseeable future: voter education and procuring the next voting system. It's why I was elected. The people have entrusted me with the future of their democracy, and my job is to be a good steward of their trust in their electoral process. Democracy ultimately relies on trust above all else. Trust that your vote counts. Trust that your elections are fair. And trust that your election officials adopt and maintain the best practices. Our elections have come a long way from the days of Leander Perez and Huey Long. That didn't happen by accident. It was the hard work of public servants who believed Louisiana could be better. People who worked day and night to get us ranked in the top 10 in the nation for election practices. It's my goal to preserve and build on their success. We're 301 days in, and we're doing just that. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions. Okay, I'm going to take my readers off now.
Secretary, thank you. I am wondering if you've spoken in person with any voters during the early voting period who are concerned about their ballots counting or concerned about the accuracy of this election.
So the question is, if have I spoken with any voters who are concerned that their early vote has counted?
If it will count.
If it will count.
Or if they can be, if they should be worried, or if they can be confident.
Or if they should be worried, or if they can be confident. We always get a few people who ask questions, but people in Louisiana can vote with confidence, knowing that their votes are safe and secure and they're counted. And sometimes when people go vote early, they're unfamiliar with the different kind of machine. Request absentee ballots as early as they can, as soon as they know that they want an absentee ballot, and to mail it back in as quickly as they can as well, because the post office deadlines don't align with the deadlines in the law.
And then just one follow-up. Have you heard from parish registrars about concerns that are coming up at their early voting locations?
Now, the main thing we've been hearing about this time, and we've had very smooth early voting. We've got lots and lots of compliments from people about how easy the process is, and how much they appreciate it. And we have 10 days of early voting now for presidential elections. That was done temporarily in 2020 because of COVID, and the legislature made it permanent in 2021. So for every presidential election now, we'll be having 10 days of early voting. And what was the question again? Oh, the registrars, right. The only thing that we have been hearing about is people have come in unaware of the rule against electioneering within the 600-foot range around polling locations. And so they're coming in their enthusiasm, wearing their candidate's shirt or a slogan hat, and they're being asked to remove that because it is against the law to electioneer within that zone. And so wearing apparel with your candidate's name on it or a slogan from your candidate's campaign, whether it be on a hat or a shirt or a sticker, it's that you'll be asked to remove that, or turn your shirt inside out, remove your hat. And so we've had a few people who are not happy about that rule, but that is the law, and we're going to abide by the law.
Earlier, you made reference to, I think it was a procurement issue that would extend or add 2 years to the process.
Right.
Can you expand upon that?
Sure. So in 2021, the legislature passed a bill called Act 480, and it added several steps to the procurement process that no other agency has to go through. But you know, there were some concerns after the 2020 election about things that may have happened in other states, and so there was you know, a lot of people at the Capitol asking for more transparency and changes. And so, so they added several steps to the process, and unfortunately that's going to make it take a lot longer. And we estimate that it'll take 2 years longer for us to get through the procurement process. And it's already a long process, and as you may know, the last 2 times that the Secretary of State's office attempted to do a request for proposals for a new voting system, the request for proposals were set aside, or the contract was set aside, and the whole process was derailed and had to be started over again. And so, you know, we just really, our machines are so old now and they're falling apart. We really need to get a new system in place, and we need to get it as quickly as we can. And we're all for transparency, but some of the new rules are redundant and unnecessary.
Secretary, what efforts have been made to ensure that older adults living in long-term care facilities or assisted living communities have equitable access to voting?
And she asked, the question is, what measures are taken to make sure that people who live in nursing homes and long-term care facilities have equal access to voting, if I hear it right. And we have an excellent program called our Nursing Home In-Person Voting Program that we encourage all nursing home residents to sign up for. And if you're in this program, you can vote. The registrars of voters actually go in person to the nursing homes and vote the residents in person. And they let the families know ahead of time when they'll be coming so the families can be there. Our nursing home residents are some of our most vulnerable voters, and so we really want to make sure that their family knows when they're voting so that they can be there and see that they voted. Some of them have dementia; they might not remember that they voted, and so we have that wonderful program, and we encourage everyone to sign up for it, and they can vote in person at the nursing home and have the assistance of a professional election administrator there to help them.
Since we're dealing with the presidential election, the first question I have is, if you know, is there any budget unit within your office or any person in your office that might have any responsibility for payment of the judgment
There's no, but he asked if anybody in my office had the authority or the knowledge to pay a settlement to Dominion voting machines. No? What, any money? To payment of the obligation, of what obligation is that? The settlement? So that settlement, we were not a party to that suit, and we don't have any responsibility. That was a lawsuit that they sued some other entities, but we've never been sued by any voting machine company to my knowledge. So we wouldn't be responsible, and it would actually be illegal for us to pay anything. So
regarding poll watchers, of course, you need those. You can't have it without them. But it seems like it's getting harder and harder to attract new people to do it. Most of them are well north of 60, some are even in their 80s doing it, and you just don't see too many people stepping up to places to do that. What are you doing to attract, or maybe get more people to do that?
thank you. He's asking about poll watchers, but I think you mean poll commissioners or poll workers, right? So we have both. We have watchers and we have commissioners. We encourage anybody who wants to be a watcher to actually become a commissioner because we need them to help with the elections if they can. So he said that there are many people who are aging out who've been working as polling commissioners or elections commissioners for many years, and they're retiring now, and we don't see young people stepping in to take their place. And so we've been doing several things to try to recruit new ones. Everywhere I go now, I talk about it. It is a responsibility of the clerks of court. They hire the elections commissioners, but they've expressed to me as I traveled across the state that they are having a lot of elections commissioners retire, and they're not seeing people coming in to take their place. So we're just trying to find ways to recruit younger people. You can work as a polling commissioner even as young as 17. You don't even have to be 18 yet. You can work as a polling commissioner. And we're trying to get recently retired people because they're still young and have a lot of vigor and can work a long day, but they have the time to work a Saturday as well as a Tuesday election. It's a fun thing to do. You get to see all of your neighbors and friends, and you make a little bit of extra money before Christmas. So some of the things that we've done is social media campaigns to try to recruit new poll workers. And we've also, we're working on a continuing legal education for the Bar Association to provide continuing education credits for taking the poll worker class and becoming a certified poll worker after you take that continuing education. And we've been, just speaking to civics groups and other kinds of organizations and trying to get their members to step up and sign up to be a polling commissioner. You can get the application on our website, and then you turn it in to your local clerk of court. Ms. Landry?
In 1996, the state legislated paper ballots for military personnel. And those ballots were also RCV ranked choice voting ballots. So since that time, military personnel has been able to use paper ballots without having to vote in runoffs because they're ranked choice voting. Do you foresee that happening for all citizens? And what would need to happen for us to have paper ballots for all voters?
So she asked if, she said in 1996 there's a law passed for military and overseas voters to use absentee ballots and to employ ranked choice voting for the runoff election. And do I
not for
do
runoff election? Ranked choice voting does not have runoff.
right for so that they don't have to vote in the runoff election. And she asked if I foresee that for every other voter. And the legislature last year actually banned ranked choice voting. So other than militaries and overseas, it is banned now. And that was a bill that we supported because ranked choice voting is confusing to voters. It's convoluted. and it resulted in some people's votes not counting at all, and we don't think it's a good way to vote. We have to do it with the military and overseas because our elections are so close together, and we've asked the legislature to provide more time between our primary and our general elections so that we have more time to prepare, and we also can stop doing that. But there are lots of factors involved in that, and we have to work with our congressional delegation about making sure that they are elected on the federal election day, and it's complicated by some jurisprudence. Foster versus Love is the case that we have to comply with. So no, I don't see it. I don't see that as an option for regular voters because it's banned now in Louisiana. And the system that I'd like to see us get has a paper component. So that's the law now. The new system that we get will have to have a paper component. So you can still vote, though, on the equipment that you're used to. So we still have the speed, accuracy, and efficiency of modern technology. But when you vote, a paper backup is created that will allow you to verify your vote, and then that paper record is kept for 22 months, and we use those to conduct risk-limiting audits after every election, and we would use them in a recount as well. And that provides a verification of the electronic tally of your votes, as well as, a way to do recounts and audits. And so I think that's the best system for Louisiana. That's the system that I'm going to work for us to get, is one that employs modern technology so we still get our results on election night like we're used to. We still have the speed and accuracy of electronic equipment, but we have the paper backup to verify it. Anybody else? Mr. Jerry?
You practically answered the question while I was asking. Some of the complaints I always had about the short time between first primary and second time is different around the country, especially with people running against the incumbent. They were talking about their fundraising. You say in the legislature they're working on it to increase the time?
He asked about the time between the primary and general elections and whether we're working with the legislature. We've been in conversations with the legislature about lengthening the time between the primary and general for a long time. When we go to closed party primaries, we will have a longer time between, so that will help a little bit, but it's only like a week or two added, which is a lot for us. It gives us a lot of breathing room. But I'm not sure if it'll solve the problem of the military having to use the ballots that they use. But thank you for that question.
So among some groups of voters, there's a belief that the 2020 presidential election results were perhaps fraudulent, or somehow they're not valid. And I'm just wondering, in your view, how that persistent belief impacts the presidential election here in Louisiana this year.
So at least with her long questions, again, not sure I can repeat it. She said, some people question, this was the question, the question is, some people question the results of the 2020 election, and do I anticipate, excuse me, that will happen again here in this election? Is that the question?
Yeah, or how do you think the fact that belief still persists, how does that influence the presidential election?
How does that belief still persist, and how does that influence this election? So I can only speak to Louisiana, and because I'm the Louisiana Secretary of State, and so we didn't have really that problem here that other states had of questioning the results. We have safe, secure, and accurate elections here in Louisiana. 70% of people believe that our elections are safe, secure, and accurate, and the polling shows that. And so we have measures in place, unlike other states, for what to do in an emergency. So we didn't have the problem of bypassing our legislature, because we have a system of enacting an emergency election plan that involves my office, the governor's office, and the legislature. And all three, the legislature gets to vote on that plan. And so we didn't have the issues that other states had. We had safe, secure, and accurate elections like we always do, and I anticipate that's what we'll have again in this presidential election, and we'll get our results on election night, unlike some other states too. So I can only speak to Louisiana, but I think Louisianians can vote with confidence, knowing that their vote is secure.
I've got a question about the closed primary law.
Okay.
Considering that some 30% of the state's voters, registered voters, are independents now, not Democrats or Republicans, will you comment on the issue of fair ballot access for independents? And in particular, say whether you support the provision in the new law requiring independents and third-party candidates to go through a cumbersome petitioning process to get on the ballot, whereas that is not required for Democrats and Republicans. It seems very discriminatory.
So he asked about the new law that closes the party primaries for some races and requires an independent candidate to get a petition to run instead of the other way that the other candidates get on the ballot. And you referenced independent, but in Louisiana we have independent registrations and then we have no party registrations. And so the law that was passed said, and this is part of the voter education that we're going to be doing next year, if you're a no party voter, if you're affiliated with no party, you can vote in either primary. But if you are a registered independent, you are considered a member of the independent party, and you can't vote in either primary. And so we will be trying to educate the voters about that. And he also asked me what my position on it is, and I, as I said repeatedly during the legislative session, I take no position on that. That is up to the legislature. It's 100% their purview to create that policy. And so they passed the law. It was supported by the governor as well. And I didn't take a position on it. I just wanted to make sure that we had enough time to implement it, that we had enough resources to implement it, and enough resources and time to educate the public about it, and that's going to be my focus. So, I still don't have a position on it.
I'd just like to make it clear that there's a distinction between voting and being a candidate.
Right.
The new law says an unaffiliated voter can vote in the primaries of the Democrats or the Republicans. That is a no-party voter. But to become a candidate, whereas before you could simply file a modest qualifying fee, just as the Democrats and the Republicans can participate in their primaries. But now, independents, meaning third-party members or anyone but a Democrat or Republican, has to go through a complicated petitioning procedure in which Democrats and Republicans can't even sign the petitions. And they must, whereas before they could run for Congress with about a $600 qualifying fee, now they got to get 1,000 signatures from people other than Republicans.
So I'm never going to be able to repeat that question. But his question, I think the point was that it's different. Candidates running and having access to the ballot is a different question from independents and no party voters voting. So independent and no party candidates and anyone who's not one of the major recognized parties in Louisiana will have to, it can't just pay a qualifying fee and get on the ballot. They'll have to go through a petitioning process to get on the ballot. And he wanted to know if I thought that was an access to ballot issue. And again, that's up to the legislature. I took no position on that. There is a lot of people talking about that. There are a lot of people talking about that, and I'm sure that the legislature will listen to anybody's concerns and that they will address it if it needs to be addressed. But it's not something my office has the authority to do anything about it. It's 100% the purview of the legislature. So again, we don't have a position on it. But we're ready to enact the new law, and I think we start next year educating voters about the changes, and we'll be hitting the ground running on that as soon as this election is over.
Earlier this year, there was an election that was challenged in Caddo Parish, and although it doesn't affect us, it had to do with the sheriff's race. It was very, very close, and instead of the Board of Election Supervisors tearing off or witnessing the tearing off of the absentee ballot stubs which qualify that vote, they found that the employees of that office had torn those off. So anybody saying, the qualifying information for that absentee ballot to be counted properly, they found some people had voted in person and some people sent in an absentee ballot. It caused the entire election to have to be redone. What type of education has been done throughout the different parishes to let them know those absentee ballots and that qualifying stuff has to be torn off with some sort of supervision, not just as they come in to make sure they're counted properly? And then is that part of your education program going forward?
So she asked about the sheriff's race in Caddo last year, which was decided by one vote, and ultimately we had to redo that election because they contested the election. There is a procedure in law for contesting an election, and they were able to show that it needed to be redone because the number of votes exceeded one, which was what decided that election. And so she asked particularly about the tearing off of the flaps on absentee ballots by employees of the Registrar of Voters Office. And the law does allow us to prep ballots in advance. We can't count them in advance, but you can prep them in advance. And we also look in that flap, if anything's missing on that flap and the absentee ballot arrives in time for them to do this, they give the voter an opportunity to cure the ballot by, if they're missing their mother's maiden name, they call them, write them, email them, ask them to come in and fill in the missing information. If they forget to sign it, they give them the opportunity to cure that. And then the ballots can be prepped and stacked, but they're not counted until election day in a open public meeting, but it's sequestered so that the results don't leak out. But it's an open public meeting, and they're tallied in there and not released until that night. So I'm not aware of any that was any of those flaps were the reasons for having to redo the election. I know that there was someone who accidentally voted twice. There were two people who had sent in an absentee ballot and had been checking to see if it got in, and that late afternoon, the day before the election, it didn't get there, and so they came in to vote in person because they thought it got lost in the mail. And it had been actually the list that we provide, the supplemental list that we provide early that morning, was late arriving there, and so it messed that up. And he still thought his ballot hadn't gotten there. Long story, but we fixed that. We've changed the policy so that supplemental list now has to be delivered the night before, no matter how late it is, so that it gets there timely. And we always train our commissioners, both the early voting commissioners who help to prep those absentee ballots in the bigger parishes, and our election day poll commissioners are trained by the clerk of court. We provide training materials as well, and we help with that training, and we're always updating it and addressing any concerns that happen. Right.
And it's very expensive, obviously, to have another election over something like that. And so I was just curious if that was part of your education.
And her follow-up is that it's more important for smaller elections when you have one or two votes that often decide those elections. So we always have many elections that are decided by fewer than 20 votes. So yeah, it is important. We try to do everything right. We do have humans who work elections, and so sometimes humans do make errors, but the law provides a way to contest an election, to redress the problem, and to hold the election again if necessary. Whenever you have an election, I think over 40,000 people voted in that race, and it was decided by one vote. It shows you how important your vote is. But we also had legislation this session that addressed some of the issues from that race as well, and one of them was there's a procedure in law called interdiction where a court can declare that you're interdicted and they take away your rights, and that it can include your right to vote. And we had a couple of people who were interdicted, and the registrar of voters did not get notice of that because the interdiction happened in a different parish. So Michael Mellorin, who's from the Shreveport area, Representative Mellorin had a bill that addressed that, and that now requires the person who is the curator of the interdicted person now has to make sure that that judgment is delivered to the registrar where the person is registered to vote. So that should resolve that issue as well. So we did address some things procedurally, and policy-wise, just within the agency, and then we had legislation to address some of the other issues. So we hope we've addressed everything that happened there. But our elections are put on by humans. We couldn't do it without the thousands and thousands of people who help us, and sometimes they do make mistakes despite all the training that we give them.
Are the same sign-in books used for early voting used in the general election?
He asked if the same sign-in books that are used for early voting are used in the general election. And what we use for sign-in in early voting is we check your ID and we find you in our registration system and we mark you down as having voted in the registration system, and then we hand you a card that's programmed with your ballot that you go and use to vote with. On election day, we have printed out registers where if you early voted, your name is marked as having early voted. So it's not the same register, but it does include, a notation that the person already voted. So that's, and absentee as well. Those people are marked as having already voted.
The mail-in ballots used by military personnel, at the top of them, it says copyright Dominion Voting Systems, or the 2024 ballots for military personnel copyrighted to Dominion.
I'd have to check. I don't know exactly what you're talking about, so I would have to check. We do all of our own programming, though. No one ever touches our machines. I often talk about, and some of you have probably heard me talk about, the 4 Ps of election integrity, and that's our people, our policies, our procedures, and our physical security. And the first P is our people. Only our trained technicians ever program our machines or touch our machines or do the maintenance on our machines, and the registrars of voters and the clerks of court, professional election administrators. We don't have vendors on our machines like some states do. And so
Well, it was printed at the top of the military ballots, copyright Dominion.
and they're printed here in state printing. And so, it was not programmed. Our employees program our ballots, and they do all the maintenance on the machines. Even though it might say copyright on there, it's still programmed by us. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I think I'm sinking through this riser here, so I want to make sure you get out safely here.
There's no doubt. We're in good shape.
Yes. I'm scared to move around because my feet are so kind of numb.
Sorry.